Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to come watch the latest video I'm putting out today on the Texas rig worm. Kind of my setup and how I rig it up and how I like to fish it. First of all, I want to thank everybody for all the likes, comments, and all you that have subscribed to the channel. It's really been cool to see all the feedback and everything I've been getting, and I really appreciate that as well. The dialogue back and forth through the comments on the different videos I made to this point. And I'm hoping today I can go across, I'll go over some information, bring something to your attention that'll help you in your Texas rig fishing and help you just catch more fish in general. First off, getting off to the basics, the rod, reel, and line. Most of the time when I'm Texas rig fishing, I'm fishing with either a 7-foot or 6.5 foot, depending on what kind of cover I'm fishing. Medium, heavy rod. I don't have any particular rod preference. I don't have any brand that I'm loyal to, or I go and I put my hands on rods according to the technique that I'm going to use it for and what I'm going to fish it for, and I know what I like, and that's what that's just what I do. That's how I go about picking my rods for different things that I'm going to use them for. This just happens to be a 7-foot Bass Pro qualifier rod. It's a good backbone, but yet it's still very, very sensitive. And that's something that when you're fishing the Texas rig, you kind of need, and it's helpful to you. So I'm either using a 7-foot or 6.5 foot medium heavy rod. 12 to 15 pound P-line CXX in the green color. That's the copolymer that I use on all my bottom baits: worms, jigs, drop shot, anything on a spinning rod. That's the line that I use. It's been very good to me. I've only been using this for like 6 to 8 months, but I've been real impressed with it. It holds up good against cover, and it's got a good strength and knot strength to it as well. As far as the reel, I use just about all my reels are KastKing reels. This is 7:4:1. Gear ratio is pretty much what I use any kind of bottom bait that I'm fishing. I like to keep the gear ratios relatively the same according to whatever technique it is I'm doing. That ain't important to some people. Everybody spends their money on what they can afford and what feels good to them and what works for them. Those reels work for me. I've been using KastKing reels for 7, 8 years. And I still have the very first one I ever used. They don't break the bank, and they're reliable, and even that first one I bought still works to this day. So, as far as hooks, one thing I want to tell you about a hook on a Texas rig is you don't ever want to use too big of a hook that takes away from the action of the plastic that you're throwing, but you don't want to use too small of a hook that you don't get good hook penetration on the bait that you're throwing. Like, one of my favorite things to throw on a Texas rig, and most of these baits I'm going to be going over today, honestly, a lot of them are springtime baits, because we're going into the spring. After the spawn's over and we go into summer, I'll have a couple of different baits I'll throw in the summer that I don't have laying here, but I kind of break the stuff down according to the season we're heading into. So after the spawn's over, I might do another short Texas rig video on how and the baits that I use in the summer. But for now, we'll stick to the springtime stuff. The Magnum Finesse Worm by Zoom. That's a bait that I keep tied on a Texas rig a lot. It's a bait that's been good to me. Catch a lot of fish with it. And I usually fish it on a 4-aught EWG hook, Gamakatsu EWG. This is the black worm, black color. It's a big enough hook that will penetrate all this plastic, and it also doesn't take away from the action of this bait. Now, when you're going to a smaller bait, let's say like this Zoom brush hog, you want to use a smaller hook. Let's see if you can see this. This is a 4-aught round bed hook. It's enough hook to get through the plastic, but it does not take away from the action of this bait. So that's an important thing, is the hook size. Is don't put too big of a hook on your plastic to take away action, but at the same time, you want enough hook to get the job done and get the hook into the fish. As far as weights go, for myself, I'm primarily either fishing an 1/8 ounce, 3/16, a 1/4 ounce, or 3/8 ounce. Those really are basically the 4 sizes I use. In the areas where I fish, I'm not fishing in heavy grass mats and they're real thick vegetation. Now there's a couple of places where I may run into something like that, but not very often. So those 4 weight sizes usually cover everything that I need. I always use tungsten. Woo Tungsten is the brand that I choose to use for all my fishing. Tungsten is just better as far as the size of it. I think the smaller size of tungsten is helpful. I know it's a little bit more expensive. Well, it's a lot more expensive than lead. But when you're fishing around a rock, when you're trying to get a good feel of the bottom, if it changes from big rock to pea gravel or sand or clay, tungsten is really, really good for that. It's real helpful. One thing that Woo Tungsten does, and other brands might do it too, I ain't saying just them, is they stamp the weight size on each sinker, and that's just something to me that's helpful, and it's quick. If you're trying to re-rig on the boat and you don't want to guess what size sinker you're using, Woo Tungsten stamping that on the side is just something I think is kind of a cool little deal that they do, and it's helpful to me. Let's talk about weights for a second. You got to remember the weight in the spring is going to be dictated by the mood of the fish. Actually, that's year round, but in the spring more so, I think. And here's what I mean by that. If your fish are biting on the fall, you want to use the lightest weight that you can use, just simply because those fish are biting that bait as it's falling. If your fish are biting more and biting better when the bait's on the bottom, you want to use a heavier tungsten. And this is just my reasoning, and here's why. The slower the fall, that is probably that particular instance or that day. That's why those fish are eating it on the falls, because that's what they're wanting. They're not wanting to go all the way to the bottom to get it. So on those days, I'll usually try to use an 1/8 ounce. Maybe a 3/16. Most time I use an 1/8. But when I know that those fish, when my bait gets to the bottom and I'm keeping constant contact with the bottom, pulling it across, dragging my bait across the cover, whatever the bottom of the cover may be, that's when I know I need to use a heavier weight, because I want to get my bait to the bottom as quick as I can, and I want it to stay there. And with a 1/4 or 3/8 ounce, that's easier to do. You know, it's easier to keep your bait on the bottom to keep it there in the strike zone where they want it. Another thing about weights, people talk about pegging. 90% of the time I don't peg my weight. That's just personal preference. Now there are times if I'm fishing and I'm catching fish, say out of real thick laydowns, wood cover, and I know they're right down in the middle of the laydowns is where the fish seem to be holding. You know, some days it's like that. You can actually pick that pattern up where you can fish the outsides, nothing. You get right in the center of it, there's your bite. So if that's the case, I will peg to keep my worm and or plastic buttoned up to the bait, to the weight, so when it falls through, it's all going down in one unit, and your sinker's not down here on the bottom and your weight's caught up in the branches somewhere. At least when you peg it, it takes, and a lot of you already know this, I'm not telling you stuff you don't know, I'm just giving an example of a situation of when I will peg. It pulls the whole unit down through the cover and it doesn't get separated. That's basically, and you know, now guys that live in Florida or somewhere where there's lots of thick matted vegetation, they're going to use a lot bigger weights, and a lot of times they are going to peg. It just depends. It's just where I live. I do fish around some grass and vegetation, but it's not that thick, and it's not a situation where I need to peg my weights. And again, this is all personal preference. I've showed you guys if you do need to peg. These are what I use. I use the bobber stops, and I use actually I like these the best. You peg it, the rubber strips. To me, I prefer those, but I use the bobber stops as well. As far as baits, let's talk baits for a second. In the springtime, my bait choices are going to be different than other times of the year. One of the biggest things I like to do in the spring, especially before the spawn, is I like to watch the rate of fall. And your bait, along with the sinker that you're using, can play a part in that. Two of the baits one bait, and these are two colors I like, that I throw in the spring a lot, is a tube. I used to have I don't know how many of these. This for many years was the best bed fishing bait that I ever used. Now I don't bed fish as much anymore. This was a Yum Vibra King tube, and the color was called Grasshopper. And this bait, I don't know how many fish I've ever caught with this tube, bed fishing and just fishing. In the spring, I throw this tube a lot. And this is just a Bass Pro Shops tube, and I think this is called a green crawl. It's just green with a red and orange, and it's got some red flake in it. A tube is something I like to throw in the spring. The colors, all these colors, they vary, you know. The springtime, one thing about the spring is as the water warms, everything in the water is going to start changing color. And it's the one time of the year when a lot of flake in your plastic can make a big difference. At least it has for me. Now some people keep color real basic, you know, I get it. Most of the time I do too. But in the spring, things I've seen, things I've discovered and learned on my own, and things I've learned at seminars and other things that I listen to the pros talk about. They've been helpful to me as well. So all these colors I'm going to show you, I throw them. I just kind of let the watercolor dictate it. A lot of times I'll look at the bluegill. The bluegills start to really, really change color as the water warms up. And I try to keep that in mind when I'm choosing my plastics, because we know how much a bass hates a bluegill being anywhere in its area around the spawn, even before they spawn. But once they get that in their head, it's time to do that, and they move on a bed, that's when I go through a stretch where I really watch the color of the plastic that I'm throwing. So if you got any questions about any of these colors, I'm going to try to, I think I know the names of all of them. It's a lot of different colors of flake here, but another bait that I like to throw in the spring is the beaver style baits. That's another, the green pumpkin with the red on the bottom. And this is a Strike King Rage Bug, one of their crawl colors. I believe this one is just natural crawl, it's called. The beaver style baits, the tubes. I throw brush hogs a lot in the spring. I don't have a ton of experience with spotted bass, but we've got 2 lakes that I fish now that over the last 4, 5, 6 years, the spotted bass numbers in them have increased. In the springtime, spotted bass eat these things like candy. I mean, I had a trip last year or the year before where I went through like 3 bags of brush hogs in like a day and a half, and it didn't matter what size weight you were throwing it on, them spotted bass were eating them. And actually, I believe that color was watermelon with orange flake. I didn't get any of those out, but that was watermelon with the orange flake in it. Lizards. People don't throw lizards as much as they used to, I don't think. It's still a good bed fishing bait. I throw a lizard around on a Texas rig a lot in the spring. This one just happens to be black with a blue tail. That's another good bait. A bait this year I'm anxious to try. I recently placed a new order with Black Label for some of the balsa crankbaits, but they've come out with plastics now too. And this is called the what is this called? The Piglet, it's called. And I like it because of the flat diameter of the bait. I'm a big believer, again, just through my experiences, that flat-sided baits and the way they affect the rate of fall, the way they fall and glide, certain times of the year get you more bites. And this is a bait, it's got a little bit of a brush hog look to it. It's just another one of those creature baits that, I just like the look of it. Never fished with it yet. This one's watermelon candy with red flake. I got a feeling that's going to be a good bait too. The Zoom Ultra Vibe Speed Crawl, and this is the bigger one. Real good bait around the bed, and it's also where I live now, the area I live now. These rivers, it's been probably one of the best pieces of plastic I've thrown. And if you're fishing cold, muddy water, I mean that ugly coffee, chocolate milk looking water, whatever your favorite creature bait is in blue sapphire, throw it. This is the best color, as far as I'm concerned, it's ever been made. I know people like black and blue and the brown colors, and this color right here in muddy water, in the ugliest water you ever find, the water you usually don't want to fish. If you drag this thing around any kind of cover when the water is that color, this blue sapphire, they eat it. And I've really noticed that in the last 2 or 3 years. I don't know what it is about that color. Maybe they can see it better. But that's the Zoom Ultra Vibe Speed Crawl. And that's the bigger one. Another bait that I use a lot around the spawn, in fact for years, it pretty much has taken the place of a lizard for me. And it's a bait by Strike King. It's a crazy looking thing. It's called the Space Monkey. Yes, that's what it's called, the Space Monkey. And I went through a stretch a few years there where this thing didn't catch nothing but big fish. June bug, they have a color called Double Header, which is watermelon with red flake in it. They have they have green pumpkin, and they have all the basic colors, but rigged up on a Texas rig and as a bed fishing bait. I know it's got all these appendages, and some guys try to stay away from the appendages. They try to keep a more compact, solid bait so they don't have anything to grab and just pull it off the bed, But I've had so much success in the spring with this bait. Now it does seem to taper off after the spawn's over, maybe in the way that, sometimes people say that about a lizard. But it's a bait I love to throw, and I'll put this usually on a 3/16 sinker, quarter at the most, and just flip it around anywhere, shoreline cover, and anywhere that if I see one on a bed, if I happen to see one, because like I said, I don't really bed fish as often. I used to search them out. Now if I come across them, I'll fish for them. I don't really search out bed fish anymore. But that's a real good bait, the Strike King Space Monkey. I mentioned this bait before, the Magnum Finesse Worm. That's Houdini, a lot of flake, silver, gold, and red flake in that. And this is just green pumpkin with blue flake. All of these I read on the big 4-all EWG hook. And lastly, as far as springtime bait choices go, the good old stick bait. Now, everybody likes the Senko. I have always used the Bass Pro Shops version of that, the Sticko. Doesn't cost as much, obviously. I think Senko's even changed, the company's changed hands, and a lot of people say the plastic isn't the same. They don't hold up, they're not the same consistency with the plastic that it used to be. These are some of the colors I really like to throw as the water's warming, like I said, and we're getting closer any time through the spring. This is Watermelon Magic, and hopefully you can see all the flake. It's just loaded down with it, and the bluegill and everything. This time of the year is when they really start to pop. All the color comes in when they've been in the winter. Everything gets a pale, dull look to it. All the fish do. The bass, the bluegill, the crappie, everything. And as the water warms, as we get in the spring, the colors start to change. Anything with the green and red flake. This is a color I've had a lot of luck with. It's called Sprayed Grass. Now this color, we have a couple of the lakes have developed a lot of bank grass, is what I call it. I don't really know what the name of it is, but it's basically, I call it that because the only place you see it is on the bank, say maybe 4 or 5, sometimes 6 feet out. It doesn't grow very deep, but fish love it and fish hang around it. And this color is called Sprayed Grass, and I have done really well around the bank grass in any situation with this color right here. And this last color, this is just called Bluegill. It's a dark green with gold and then blue with silver on the other side. Any of those colors, and I'm sure you guys got colors that you like. If you want to comment and tell me what they are, you may feel like I've left something out that's just a color you really, really like to throw. But do remember the one thing about the real, real cold, muddy water. And this is before the spawn. Right now, if you're getting a lot of rain and your lakes and your rivers are staying high and they're staying muddy and the water's just nasty, blue sapphire, and whatever your favorite kind of creature bait is, crawl, creature, beaver, whatever it is. I feel like it's something about that color, and it definitely gets more bite. Let's talk retrieve for a second. How the fish are biting, just like how aggressive they are, how my weight is dictated by that, my retrieve is also. If they're hitting it on the fall, and you can tell it's never reaching bottom, most of your bites are coming before the bait ever gets to the bottom, I tend to hop and sweep my bait more. Cast towards the target and hop and sweep the bait as I'm retrieving, because they're hitting it on the fall. So when you pull it up, the more times you pull it up and let it fall, the more opportunities you're getting to get bit. Now when they are on the bottom, and you know that your bites are coming when the bait's on the bottom, you want to maintain bottom contact, that's when you just drag. Just constantly keep the bait hitting, whether it's just a silt on the bottom, or if you got a rock bottom, or whatever it may be, pea gravel. keep the bait on the bottom, and that's gonna, give you a better opportunity to get bit when that's the scenario where they're just wanting that bait to be on the bottom. And another time you use a heavier weight too is if you come across the bed. A lot of times you just got to figure out the area in that bed where they don't want your bait to be. And if you're using a little bit heavier bait, excuse me for a second, heavier weight, you can keep that bait in that area longer. You can move your rod. You can even take your line, move your line. You can keep that bait there longer with a heavier weight. So that is an instance where heavier weight does come in handy. And speaking of retrieves and cover, years ago, this was before Bass University ever was a thing. I know Ike Nelly's blown it up now, and it's a big thing now, and there's good information there and all that. But there used to be a seminar circuit called Bass Techniques, and I went to one of those in Richmond, Virginia, years ago. And the only reason I went was because Larry Nixon was going to be there talking about worm fishing. And it was Larry Nixon, and there was other good ones there. Dion Hibden was there. Jimmy Houston was spinnerbait, talking about spinnerbait. And there was a smallmouth guy at the time that was real popular. His name was Tony Bean. He was there. And I haven't caught a lot of smallmouth. I've caught a few, but I'll never forget, I still have it to this day. I have every note I wrote down from Larry Nixon's talk on plastics, fishing, and worm fishing. I laminated them, and I still have them in a binder. And I still, every now and then, I'll pull it out and read it just to make sure, just to refresh some of the things he said. But it was one thing he said that he talked about. He talked about weights, and he talked about hooks, and this has been a long time ago, so things have changed. A lot of things with tackle, especially in the last 5 years, it's like blown up and it's gotten crazy. But he talked about how he fished cover, and he said before the spawn, he always starts on the outside of the cover and works his way in, like if you come to a laydown. And with the Texas rig, this is something to this day, I've always done, just because Larry Nixon said it and it got ingrained in his head of mine. And if I come to a laydown, I'm going to hit the outside edges first and then work my way in. You pick it apart, but you start on the outside and work your way in before the spawn and during the spawn. He said after the spawn, he goes right to the thickest part of the cover first, and then he would work his way out. Now, he may have explained why he did that. I didn't write that in my notes. And I was so caught up in the fact I was listening to Larry Nixon talk about worm fishing, I probably forgot to write it down. I don't know. But I've always done that. In the spring, start on the outside, and it could be the outside of a dock, it could be the outside of a laydown, it could be the outside of a grass line, it could be outside of a stump field, it could be a drop off, whatever it is. Mostly I think he was talking about thicker cover, so a drop off might not apply. He started on the outside, worked his way in. After the spawn, fish were going back out to deeper water. He starts at the heaviest, thickest part of the cover and works his way out. I've never forgotten that. That's just something that stuck. And, it's just something that I do. And I think if Larry Nixon does it, Rick needs to do it too. So, that's just my take on the Texas rig as far as how I fish it in the spring. The rod, the reel, the line, the baits, the colors, the hooks, the sinkers, and the retrieve. Can't think of anything I may have left out. Talking about rods and reels for a second, real quick. Again, to me, a worm rod is something when I know I need to replace one I've gotten. I go and I don't like ordering rods that I can't pick them up and feel them, you know, put my hands on them and get a feel for how that ride feels and what I'm going to use it for. So it's just the way I am. I'm the same way with crank. Now crankbait rods are different because I have used the cranking sticks from Bass Pro for years. So I'm comfortable with those. They changed them a little. So I always go and even then I'll put my hands on them to see if it's still feels like something I want to throw, I want to use. But and reels, most of the time I'll spend $100 on a rod, and I'll spend, I'll say between 50 and 80 on a reel. If it works for me, it's just what I like to use. Everybody's different. Some guys like the top of the line, you know, and I get it, you know. I used to try different things. I've tried some of the rods and reels that are more expensive, and I can't say that I had any reason to continue to buy them. I'll just put it that way, compared to other stuff I was using and have used. So that's all preference. Everybody's different. Everybody works. Everybody spends their money on what they want to use and what they're comfortable using. So I hope that this helps you guys with your Texas rig. Leave comments and questions. Texas rig is such a staple to what people do bass fishing. It's been around probably longer than maybe any other plastic soft bait rig that there is, and it's just who knows how many fish have been caught over the years with a Texas rig, man. It ain't no telling. But I hope this helps somebody. Like I said, in the summer, my idea and setup on it changes somewhat, so I may do another video in the summer about the little differences in the Texas rig. But I hope this helps. I want to thank everybody for watching the channel and all the comments, questions, for the likes and the subscribes. And if you're watching the videos and you're not subscribing, I ask that you would. All you gotta do is click that little red button, because I can tell a lot of you are coming out watching the videos, and it would be a help to me if you subscribe. I'm going to keep trying to put out a video a week, and in some weeks I've been able to put out 2. But I just want to thank everybody for all the support in the channel and for watching and for all the questions and comments. Really, anything I've left out, a bait that works for you, a retrieve that works for you, you know, a color. I want to give you guys information, and what I was hoping for is happening. You're giving it back in your questions and your comments, and that's, you know, that's the reason for doing this. So thanks again. Hope everybody has a great day. I've gotten a few comments about my setup here in my garage, in my shop, whatever you want to call it, and I'm working on that. And I want to do this video different. So I laid out stuff a little bit different, and let me know if this is better than what I was doing before. So thanks again for watching, for subscribing, and for the likes, and I hope everybody has a great day and tight line. See you next time. Thank you.